I want to start with a quote from Alice Walker that I think really embodies transformative justice and really embodies the work that I'm involved in, which is building alternatives. Alice says, "Look closely at the present you are constructing. It should look like the future you are dreaming." And what I want to talk to you about today is visioning. I want to talk to you about how do we get the world that we long for? How do we stop fighting against things and figure out what we are fighting for? For everyone in this room, I want you to think about not just what you're against. Yes, we can spend all day long talking and deconstructing and analyzing about the things that we don't like in this world. But if someone came to you and said, okay, you're right, the world is completely horrible, what should we do? If someone said, here's the whole US Treasury, you distribute it however you think it should be, what would you say to them? What does justice look like? What does freedom and liberation look like? Do we know? Do you all know? I want us to practice this. I want us to practice that visioning muscle until we're so good at it. Just in the same way that we've practiced our deconstructing and critiquing and negative thinking muscles. Those are very, very strong. And if all it was needed was smart people to win, we would have won 5 times over. I don't want to be up here just talking about analysis. I want us to think about our souls, not just our goals. To me, this work is spiritual work. Who do we want to be? Do we want to be people and a generation who continues to lock people up in cages? I'm a prison abolitionist. Do we want to be people who continue to use punishment and revenge as our main strategies? Who do we want to be in this work? Who do you want to be as an individual? Who do we want to be as a collective? Who do we want to be as a world? Who do we want to be as a movement? And what do we want to leave for the next generation? I do transformative justice work with the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective, the BATJC. It'll just roll off your tongue if you practice it. And so we work to help build and sustain and support responses to child sexual abuse that don't rely on the state and that also actively cultivate things like safety, healing, accountability, resilience, the very things that we know help to prevent future acts of violence. And I work specifically on child sexual abuse, but because violence is all tied up together, I end up working on a ton of different types of violence. So when we're talking about transformative justice, what we're talking about are responses to violence that don't rely on the state, they don't rely on police, prisons, the criminal legal system, foster care system, ICE, but that they also actively help to build the world that we long for. How do we meet our immediate needs in a way that gets us closer to the world that we actually want to have? We don't want to just keep putting Band-Aids on things. I know we are used to working in crisis, but part of what it would mean to build the world we long for is to practice what it looks like to live not in crisis, to not organize in crisis, to not organize just simply against things, but to actively organize for things. What would it mean if we lived our lives and our organizing and our work from a politic of what we love and what we long for, what we ache for? How many of us here have been hurt, deeply hurt, had our hearts broken by community, by movement? What would it look like if we move from what we want rather than what we're against? What if a lot of us probably live a lot of our lives out of obligation, right? Out of guilt. What if we shifted that? Just for a day, just for a week, just for a month, just for a movement? What would that look like? One of the reasons why I think it's really important to talk about transformative justice and community accountability is because, to me, questions about accountability are inevitably questions about justice. Questions about justice are inevitably questions about accountability. So if we can grapple with accountability and what that actually is and looks like on a micro level in an accountability process, a small community accountability process, that will help us to be able to articulate what justice could look like. Because what I hear from survivors, and I myself am also a survivor, what I hear from survivors over and over and over again is I want accountability. I don't even need an apology. I want them to not do this again. I want no one else to have to go through what I went through. I want them to change their behavior. And accountability, the most important part of it, yes, making amends is important. Yes, saying sorry is important. Yes, recognizing the harm and the impact you've done is important. But the most important part of accountability is that you change your behavior so it doesn't happen again. So the violence doesn't happen again. So the harm doesn't happen again. So the abuse doesn't happen again. One of the things that trauma and oppression does to us is it limits our imaginations. It limits what we can even imagine is possible. So when I talk about practicing visioning, I'm talking about healing, really. How do we start to flex our muscles, encourage each other to practice visioning, to practice imagining more? We don't even know what we don't know yet. And as we do the work, it makes more things possible. As more things are possible and the work continues, it makes more things possible. How do we take time in our days, time in our staff meetings, time in our conferences to vision what we want? What do you want the world to look like in 50 years? What do you want your community to look like in 50 years? What do you want your city, your town to look like in 50 years? And I want you to know, this is not about perfection. This is about practice. How can we hold the state accountable if we can't even hold ourselves accountable? If we can't even hold each other accountable? I look at this room, and I've had a lot of practice doing cross-movement building work in all different types of movements, and I know that there's a lot of pain in this room from between the people in this room. I know that our organizations have abuse in them as we're working to end abuse. I know that we traumatize each other as we're working to end trauma. So what I want to challenge you all here today is I want to challenge you to be in alignment with what we are preaching in our political work. Part of transformative justice is not just about, yes, working against violence and doing these responses. Part of it is also about how do we transform ourselves so that we are not asking other people to do things that we are not willing to do. That is not integrity. And I want a movement that has integrity. I want a world that's liberated, that has integrity. I want my relationships to have integrity. So if we want other people to be accountable, and we like to point all the time, right? Those are the bad people over there. We're the good people in here. No, we've all done things that we're not proud of. We all have work that we have to do of how we can be better people, more accountable to ourselves and each other. This is about falling down and getting back up again. It's about spectacular failures and learning how we can be and do better. It's about resilience in the face of fear, humility in the face of ego, and faith in the face of hopelessness. We don't talk enough about how much organizing requires faith. All of us are moving towards a dream that we don't know. We've never seen it, and yet we move with the faith that it will one day happen. We have never seen a world where sexual violence doesn't exist, and I know that we can get there, and we will. Our political work, to me, should make us more human in an inhumane world. So I know these are short, so I want to close with a bit of a piece of writing that I have done. How do we leave a legacy worth fighting for? This is intergenerational work. This is generational work. We cannot end generational cycles of violence unless we have generational strategies. How do we leave a legacy worth fighting for? How do we learn to invest in each other as our greatest resource? Not funders, each other. Because we will need each other to build the kind of world that we want. Liberation is a collective process. You cannot do it by yourself. If you could, we would have already done it by now. How can we cultivate a sense of shared commitment to each other and understand this as part of our work, as a valuable part of our work? We like to practice misogyny even with each other. Oh, emotions, that's women's stuff. We don't talk about that. That's not, it's not sophisticated organizing. Relationship building, that's not important. It is important, and it's the fabric of what's going to help us get free. How do we cultivate the kind of commitment to each other that can withstand failures, heartbreak, disappointment, gossip, mistakes, and conflict. The kind of commitment to each other and love for one another that allows us to continue to leap together, knowing that we will fall and mess up and make mistakes and get bruised, knowing that we will have to brush ourselves off and climb back up the mountain to do it all over again tomorrow. How do we cultivate that kind of commitment? That's what I want to see. One where we still choose to leap together. Thank you all very much. Have a nice day.